So today I want to talk to you about this book, Leaving Academia, A Practical Guide by Christopher Caterine. This book is so important because, frankly, there is a glut of PhDs on the market. Every year, approximately 55,000 PhDs are minted in the United States. About 34,000 of those are from American citizens and permanent residents, and approximately 18,000 of those are from temporary visa holders. While in academia, most PhDs are groomed to become academic professors, although perhaps a lot of STEM degrees can really go into industry and be applied. Only 13% of all PhDs will actually land a tenure track and full-time academic job. 13%. So the vast supermajority of PhDs will never ever land an academic job. Furthermore, the attrition rate of PhD students, those who enter and those who drop out, ranges across the disciplines between 36 and 51%. When I was in graduate school, I always heard the percentage is 50-50. Of course, I'm in the liberal arts and social sciences, so 50% of graduate students will drop out. And you can imagine that they're accruing debt while they're in there, and they might spend many years of their life that they can't get back. And now they drop out, and so they didn't get the degree, they didn't go into that profession, but they still lost that time, and they still have those student loan debts to pay off. And the vast majority of all college classes taught in the United States are taught by adjuncts, by part-time people that are making just a few $1,000s per class. So the reality is, and I love this quote that I heard from someone that said, actually getting your PhD is at the point when most people leave the profession of academia. And then they have to figure out, wow, what happened? Like, I was lied to, and now what am I going to do with my life? So this is a practical guide. This is specifically for people that entered the profession and want to leave, but it's very useful for graduate students who might be getting a PhD and realize that they need a plan B, a plan C, a plan D of what else are you going to do with this PhD. I also really want to warn people that, you don't want to get advice from some old school, old professor that's employed. What you want to do is talk to people that just recently got a PhD in your field, and where are they now, and what lessons have they learned about the academic job market. You want to talk to people who got PhDs and are not professors, because that is the vast majority of PhD holders. And obviously these people that are sitting in the tenure track jobs, especially if they're gray-haired, that's not the advice that you should be listening to, because those jobs don't exist anymore. And when that person retires, their job goes with them. So let's get into this book. And right away in the preface, Dr. Caterine is saying that he had grown up in a wealthy home, attended schools that groomed him for the modern professional world. And this is indeed true of academics. We can see in this chart the percentage of PhD students and the educational attainment level of their parents. But nowadays, it's extremely rare for PhD students to not have highly educated parents. And so, for example, I myself, my father was a professor, he had a PhD, my mother had a bachelor's degree, and I was raised into this profession. As a small child, I sat in my father's office that said Dr. Thompson on the door and said, that's going to be me. I'm going to be Dr. Thompson. And so I was raised into this profession just like a lot of academics. And so we have that cultural capital of understanding this profession. However, my father was extremely old, and he was 50 years old when I was born. And so he was telling me lessons that he had learned back in, the dark ages, and he had no clue how the profession had changed over time and how saturated the job market was now. So his advice was extremely outdated, and he was always shocked by my struggles in the job market. And so that just shows you both like how people have to have very educated parents to even get into this profession and to be groomed into it. And then also that those older generations' understanding of the labor market in academia is extremely outdated, and that's not who we should be listening to. So most of us enter graduate school because we're absolutely clueless. We don't know a thing about the academic job market, of course. We have professors lying to us. They got their PhDs back at the dawn of time, and now they're telling people that this profession has jobs to enter into. You always have to think about who this benefits. So the more applications there are to graduate schools, and the smaller number of those people that they accept into the program shows that they're very selective, that there's lots of demand for their degree because this is a product that they're selling, and that it's exclusive, that very few people get in. So those people who get in feel special. And then basically they're used as labor. They're used as research labor. They're used as graduate teaching labor for very low cost. And then, spend a decade of their life in this system. So this is also an opportunity cost that you have to incorporate into this calculation. When I finally got my PhD and was applying to 40 or 50 jobs and unable to land one, and I was $100,000 in debt, that is when I woke up to the situation and realized I might have completely ruined my life by getting a PhD. What have I done? I just spent like 10 years. I was 27 years old when I got my degree. I got a PhD in sociology from the New School in New York City. And now I was applying to all these jobs and I couldn't get one. My mother was a mortgage broker, remember 2007, in Las Vegas, specializing in option arm mortgages. And I even went there to sit in a 6-week training course to learn about option arm mortgage and how to sell mortgages. And I was like, FML, what have I done? I just got a PhD in sociology and I might end up selling option arm mortgages in Las Vegas in 2007. And then I got a job. And my job was in Miami, Florida as a teaching postdoc, teaching in women's studies. And my salary before taxes, and only for a 9-month or 10-month period, no paid during the summer, my total salary was going to be $27,000. That is my starting salary in academia at age 27 after earning an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, a PhD. I had $100,000 in debt. I was going to live in Miami, Florida, and make $27,000 before taxes. So he starts his book, chapter 1 is called Dread. I finally realized academia isn't a meritocracy. My hard work wasn't coming to fruition. My career wouldn't be spent as a professor. So there I was at 30 years old, caught unawares. There is no such thing as an alt-ac career. Academia is the alternate path. Also, the corporate world doesn't want to hire people with PhDs. They think that's weird. So if I had a PhD in sociology and I'm applying to entry-level corporate jobs, my boss has a bachelor's degree. He's not going to want to hire someone with a PhD. So corporations are timid about hiring PhDs, and the job skills just don't translate into practical skills for a corporate job or for any other kind of job. Getting a PhD almost makes you unemployable. And so basically in this chapter, he's talking about how this book is a practical guide to leaving academia or for graduate students to consider other pathways that they might pursue. Also, you might consider leaving a PhD program understanding that there aren't tenure-track jobs out there. What do you really want to do? And is a PhD required for that endeavor? And so in this first introductory chapter, he also provides other resources for people who want to figure out how a PhD can lead to a different kind of career, not an academic one. And also considering this situation of the academic profession, if someone makes it through that, finds that needle in the haystack job, gets that tenure opportunity, then the atmosphere once you become a professor, first of all, you can have very low pay, or first of all, you can end up somewhere you don't want to end up. And that's another thing, is the academic job market is nationwide. You have to be willing to go to anywhere in the country. And most people, and your partner, or to be long distance from your partner. A large percentage of academics are long distance from their partners, and especially if their partner is another academic. You're not going to find two academic jobs in the same town. So then imagine these academic couples that have to have two living situations in two different cities that cost money, and then you have to fly back and forth to see each other. So it's just an insane amount of money to live with a long distance relationship. You have to be willing to go anywhere. And so many people that I talk to they're like, oh, I'm just going to stay in New York City. That's for the top of the profession. So if you're not willing to go absolutely anywhere in this country, and also to perhaps get a divorce or at least have a long distance relationship, then that's another, serious consideration for this profession. I mean, I have not chosen where I live since I was ever. So in chapter 2, called Discern, he starts out with a story about how his wife, who's also an academic and also in the same field as him, gets a job offer in a very small, rural, conservative town. And so they're considering this opportunity. And she has a gut feeling that the school is just not a good fit. It's a very conservative atmosphere, and they're both in the same field. So she kind of used that as an excuse to perhaps turn down this job, is that her partner might not be able to get employed in the field. To which case the dean offers this counter offer, which is, a total fantasy of a spousal hire. That would just be, that's not a thing, right? Except if you're at the Ivy Leagues or something like that. So this just brings up the point of the academic job market and realities of the situation. Is, first of all, a high percentage of academics marry other academics. And so, and then it might be someone in the same program even. So you're definitely not going to get two jobs in the same department in the same town. And it's very unlikely that you get two jobs, academic tenure track jobs, in the same town if you're in the same field. So this shows that academics often end up, if they're with another academic, in a long distance relationship. Furthermore, academics might be with a partner or spouse that's also a professional worker. So that might lead to living in a long distance relationship. So consider that location issue, and now consider that many academics might be considering or being offered a short-term contract, 1 year, 3 years. So now you're going to move to this location that claimed you, and you're going to leave your partner behind wherever you're currently living, moving across the country, and then this position is only for 1 year or 3 years, and you have to apply for more jobs and perhaps move again. So I've definitely known academics that have to move across the country every few years because they have short-term contracts. And so in academia, of course, the vast majority of people that teach college classes have short-term contracts. They're adjuncts. It's semester, or it's a 1 year contract, or it's a 3-year postdoc, or what have you. It's short-term. So the author also states on page 43, I found myself despairing at the thought that I might teach the same course on Roman history every semester for the rest of my career. So that's another point is, folks who are undergraduate or early graduate students might have this fantasy of the life of the mind of an academic professor, when in reality, professors might be teaching 101 history, 101 sociology for the next 40 years of their life, the same course over and over and over again, and you're doing a lot of administrative tasks. You're working on the 5-year assessment plan and writing learning outcomes, learning objectives, and you're grading endless papers, and you have to serve on many committees, and the dean is asking you to do this service requirement and that service requirement. You might be in a toxic department. Considering how esteemed tenure track positions are, you can imagine that people who get those positions feel compelled to hold on to them for life, and they are in departments with other people that they had a falling out with 20 years ago. So plenty of academic departments also have incredibly toxic work environments and people that just hate each other. They had a fight, like you're going to work with people for 40 years or something. You are closer to the people that you work with more than your own spouse. So just to say that within the profession, there's a lot of mundane and bureaucratic and menial tasks that people don't think about. It's not just research. I mean, probably unless for people are at the top, they graduated from a top school and they're at a top research university where they're in a field that actually pays money for that type of research and that there's grant opportunities available, which in itself can be extremely taxing and stressful. Probably folks drop off in their research production, especially as they climb the academic ladder and get closer to the top. And research and publishing, I mean, that's a whole other video about unpaid labor, and you don't get paid for that kind of work unless you do get these grants. But plenty of us in the social sciences, in the humanities, are funding this research ourselves. And so it costs a lot of time and money to do research, write it up, and you don't get paid for any of your publications. And indeed, you even lose the copyright to your publication, so you don't even own that anymore. So chapter 3 is called Discover, and in this chapter he opens by stating that he's decided that he's not going to go into an academic profession, and so what can he do with a PhD and what other professions are available. So on page 55 he states, "I'd spent more than a decade cultivating expertise in a tiny sliver of human knowledge. The problem for people like us is that the deep focus and dedication that let us succeed in academia are precisely the opposite of what's required to thrive outside of it, which is having multitude of experiences and skill sets that you can apply to a variety of jobs. And plenty of people in the corporate world change jobs frequently, and so they have a lot of experience. And so it's just a real disappointment to know you've already sunk 10 years of your life into this trajectory. You only made it to the graduate school level, you never got that tenure track job, and now you're considering other opportunities. So you're already behind the curve considering your peer group who didn't get a PhD but is working in that profession that you now want to enter." Chapter 4, Decipher. In this chapter, he opens by saying, "Something in my self-presentation still screamed academic and was a giant red flag that employers couldn't ignore. Many employers will be intrigued by your advanced degree, but they're often skeptical of how you'll perform on the job. So just know that having a PhD and then entering into the corporate work environment is going to put you in an awkward position where people don't get it. And so that kind of ambivalence or, for you to have such a different background than everyone else that enters that profession is going to basically put employers off. And so you have to actually convince them that your academic work that you've done thus far is actually going to benefit them and contribute to your performance on the job." So he even provides some questions for you to consider as prompts to tell your potential employer in the corporate field. Why should non-academics care about your academic experience? How can your academic experience add value to an organization? What's the best way to frame your past work for your new audience? The biggest challenge you're likely to face when interviewing for jobs is the perception that you're overqualified for entry-level positions, but underqualified for more senior listings. This double-edged sword threatens most academics as they depart higher education. So you have the education that would put you at the top of the hierarchy in these jobs, but your experience and lack thereof and this academic trajectory doesn't even qualify you for entry-level positions. So it puts you in a very difficult position in order to convince an employer to hire you. And so he says on page 92 that you really have to therefore pay a close attention to your CV or your resume to really craft it to your specific audience and make sure it translates. Don't take an academic CV and send it out to corporate employers. That's just not appropriate. In academia, we have very lengthy CVs that list every conference presentation, every publication that we've ever done or even thought of, publications forthcoming, publications in process, every degree, every committee you've served on, every professional organization that you're a member of. So academic CVs can be, 10 pages, 30 pages long. It's just ridiculous. When you're translating your academic experience into the corporate environment, then you have to totally rewrite your CV. It needs to be 2 pages long, 3 pages long. Just, make it appropriate for the audience at hand. So he talks about translating academies into corporate. And so on page 98, he has an example. He states, "I no longer write that I taught 3 courses per semester. Instead, I've taken to boasting that I delivered $500,000 in educational services annually, considering, student tuition payments." So just a totally different mindset and perspective that you would talk about your experience. And academics, this is what we're really lacking, is understanding how to put our experience into corporate language. Chapter 5, Develop. So this is when the author starts to realize his competition in the new field he's chosen and who he's going to be working alongside and what their resumes look like. 2 boutique consultancies in New Orleans put employee biographies on their website. Each included a litany of professional successes, work with charities, leadership forums, and hobbies ranging from music to athletics. These professionals did everything and were good at it too. Instantly, I could see my resume the way others did. The accomplishments I'd been so proud of felt small and insignificant. So when you're culling your academic CV from 15 pages down to 1 page and you have to list your abilities in bullet points, you might realize that having presented 15 times on some minor Roman poet at academic conferences is just one area of focus and expertise for you, and that you, therefore, with all that time that you spent researching this minor Roman poet, you weren't doing other things and developing other skills. Meanwhile, your new peers in this corporate environment have developed an entire range of experiences and skill sets and corporate experiences that directly apply to the job at hand, or at least they have experience in this field. For the last 10 years, you've been studying some minor Roman poet, and you didn't get that job experience that the people that you're going to be competing against, who might be 10 years younger than you, have. So now you might be in a humbling position of needing to acquire new skills, and so you need to take a part-time job or an entry-level job that you might consider way beneath you, especially considering your advanced degrees, but you have to get experience now in this new profession. You also have to now create a online profile of your new career objectives. So he's talking about your social media and your LinkedIn profiles and how this needs to transition also from an academic background into your new future corporate trajectory. But he says ultimately, if you do get a job offer and now you get a foot in the door and you're starting to gain experience and traction in this new field, that you might be surprised to discover in your future, a few years down the road, that you actually get a really good compensation, and in fact, way better than you could have ever gotten in academia. Every other sector uses compensation to retain good talent. Colleges and university, meanwhile, abuse your passion, goodwill, and dedication to obtain the same end at a fraction of the cost. He says on the next page, 160, indeed, salaries for this group have remained stagnant while other professions, including academic administrators, have made significant gains. So in this chapter, he's talking about his own personal development, but also giving practical advice to the readers. And he's saying, prepare for the change, emotionally, mentally, talent-wise, skill level-wise. Get ready to enter this new profession and leave your academic past behind you. He says, keeping quiet about your past will buy you time to prove your abilities to these individuals. So just be quiet about it. Don't talk about having a PhD, and just really, learn your new job. But ultimately, if you're successful, like this author is, in finding this new job, getting in and starting to be comfortable in it, he says that in contrast to academia, in academia, I was the only person responsible for my professional development. Today, I benefit from training courses, mentoring programs, and regular discussion of best practices. And he also reports finding more collegial environments outside of higher education. So as we talked about, since tenure track jobs are so coveted, people have to keep that job no matter what. And their environment, because they spend 20 or 40 years working with the same people, might ultimately become pretty toxic and a place that people can't leave. And so a corporate job might just be more collegial and more comfortable than a potential toxic academic work environment. So on the last page, 184, under action items, he says, do something to celebrate. This isn't the end of a chapter, it's the start of one you get to write. Email your network contacts to let them know the good news and thank them for their help. After your first day on the job, update your LinkedIn profile so other academics can see what you're up to and reach out to you more easily, so that you can help other academics transition out of the academic workplace and into the corporate one. Yeah, so thank you for listening to this book overview and personal rants, and I really look forward to understanding your experience with the academic workplace and the PhD grad school experience.